I wanted to ask you about your friend Dolores Cannon.
Yes.
I know
Yep.
she spent the last at least 10 years of her life heavily promoting you as a channel, your work, the work that you do.
Yes.
Did you want to talk about the personal connection that you had with her and
Yep.
how that whole
Yep.
relationship started? She really took you under her personal wing. She was very nurturing towards you because she really believed in what you're about, your energy.
I think it's rather like, metaphorically, we've all been asleep and we've woken up and everything's different. And not just what's going on around us, but what's happened within us. So we've woken up to a higher perspective of ourselves. And obviously during that sleep period, we're doing a lot of gathering, a lot of questioning, looking at ourselves, dismantling, who we were, mind, body, spirit, having a really, really good look at, well, who am I? Where am I standing? What am I doing?
Welcome to Australia.
Thank you, Paul. It's nice to see you in the flesh rather than online.
So it's a whole different dynamic, isn't it?
Of
Because
course
we're,
it is. Yep.
particularly over the last couple of years, we're so used to interacting in our homes through Zoom, but doing something in the flesh gives you an extra dimension of
Well, it's
connection.
also it's the energy involved when you do something live like this, and collectively, it's like you can feed off the situation. Whereas when you're doing something on Zoom, it's like you've got this slight screen. Well, you have a screen, but it's completely different. Yeah.
I think technology is wonderful in so many aspects. I certainly don't think it's there to replace the in-person stuff like we're doing today, but it's a great extension of it when we
Yes.
can't, perhaps.
Yep.
But it's probably a good distinction to make, isn't it?
Yeah,
that
yeah.
it doesn't replace.
Yes. It's interesting you say that because it just made me think of, there are some people who actually prefer online stuff rather than coming in person. And it's because they feel in person is almost too confrontational, whereas, they can sort of hide behind their screen.
Hide behind a camera.
Yeah, totally. And, but I mean, I do a lot of one-on-ones personally as much as online as well. But I don't think I have any preference to anything, and also too, people have said to me that when they have personal readings online, is it different from when they actually come in person? And I don't think it has any bearing on the information that comes through. But if people are with Tabaash and literally, they say they feel energy, they can feel the presence, coming out of my body.
Wow.
And also I think it just becomes more personable and interactive, when you're actually sitting literally across from somebody.
Well, there's something tangible, isn't there, about being in a room? I remember, makes me think about when years ago when theatre was the main form of entertainment, and then the movie theatre came along, and then inevitably TV, and they always felt through these different phases that one was going to replace the other, but there's always been a need, I think, for live events, theatre, as well as cinema, as well as now Zoom and all these other technologies that are emerging where we can connect.
Yes, yeah, and that's so important. And also too, when you're doing a live situation, it's not like watching something on Netflix when you suddenly think, I'll just put that on pause and, make a cup of tea or something. So.
Well, I always find, particularly when if I go to see a film and I really want to see a film, I'll make sure I go to the cinema to do it.
Yep.
Because it's a dark room, there's no distractions, and I can really immerse myself in the experience. It's often very hard to do that in your home these days with...
It's called an atmosphere.
Yes. And it's almost something that's not quite appreciated now in a very busy, chaotic, fast-paced society where we're overstimulated with, stimulus all around us, from our smart devices to pets and children and the busyness of a big city like this, which you're in now in Melbourne. I know it's a lot bigger than
Wellington.
Wellington, where you're from.
Yes.
we had an event here yesterday in Melbourne. How did you find the event? Obviously, you were channeling Tabaash, which we'll talk about.
Yes, yep. It's funny, when I do events, at the beginning, I can feel the energy of spirit just coming around me a couple of hours before. It's rather like prepping you up for something. I never get nervous, so it's nothing like that. But you can feel the anticipation of the situation, of the event. And invariably you get on stage and you want to relate to your audience in the best way possible. So when I came back after the event, I could just feel the vibe, feel the energy, and I could feel that it had gone well. But also the fact that no one was leaving. Everyone wanted to hang around and just chat, like they were just soaking up into the vibe, basically. But yeah, I was really happy with the way it went. It's the first event I've done since the world went into lockdown. So it was good to get the foot back in the door.
I'd love to ask your perspective on that, because
Sure.
I think all of us are emerging now. Had a conversation this morning about it. In this new time, it's the beginning of a new year, 2023, we're starting to return to what we might call a new, a normal, a new sense of normal, but it's not quite the same as what we're used to.
Yeah.
What's your perspective on what we've gone through over the last couple of years and what we're finding ourselves emerging into now?
Yeah. I think it's rather like, metaphorically, we've all been asleep and we've woken up and everything's different. And not just what's going on around us, but what's happened within us. So we've woken up to a higher perspective of ourselves. And obviously during that sleep period, we're doing a lot of gathering, a lot of questioning, looking at ourselves, dismantling, who we were, mind, body, spirit, having a really, really good look at, well, who am I? Where am I standing? What am I doing? What is this world that we are living in? And what changes as an individual do I need to make? And so, waking up to this new reality is exciting, adventurous, confrontational, in a productive way. But probably a good way of putting it, suddenly we can see everything in a whole new light. But we don't just dive into this situation. We have to be quite a powerful observer, because when you wake up and you've evolved, and the story is different, and you look at a different set of rules, concepts, perspectives, everything. Even in our day-to-day connections that we have with people who we're with, I think we're all seeing each other in a different light as well. And there's more honesty. I think there's more awareness. I think there's also a positive wariness, because I think people have learned to step back and really observe before they participate. So I like this new reality, and I really like the feeling of 2023. I think it's a much lighter energy than what we've experienced over the last 3 years. And it was just really, really quite obvious to me. It's like, wow, you can really feel the gear change.
It's stepping into the unknown in a lot of ways, because I think we've been very conditioned to experience reality in a certain way, and now there seems to be just more space to maybe open up, to be open to stuff that we haven't perhaps experienced before personally in the world. We're seeing a lot of new technologies emerging. I know recently in the last couple of weeks here, AI has come more to the forefront as one example. I'm hearing about medical breakthroughs of diseases. I think we're really on the precipice. Do you get that sense? We're on the precipice of great change.
This is indicative of this new vibration. Using that word awareness again. We've woken up to this new awareness, and this new awareness, there's more life. And therefore, with more life, these things that have been waiting in the wings, so to speak, suddenly are presenting themselves because there's a collective, we're ready for it now. And so when you see, even if you look through history, there's always periods of life where, you know, a surge in technology or medical situations or whatever the case is, social things, because humanity are ready for that now. And it just opens up doors, basically. So, you know, we've turned more lights on, so of course we're going to see more and experience more.
I wanted to ask you about your friend Dolores Cannon.
Yes.
I know she spent the last at least 10 years of her life heavily promoting you as a channel, a work, the work that you do.
Yes.
Did you want to talk about the personal connection that you had with her and how that whole relationship started?
Well, it's interesting because I was actually reading one of her Convoluted Universe books, and these friends of mine lived in Christchurch actually rang me up, and I was literally reading, and they go, "Oh, have you heard of Dolores Cannon?" And I sort of went, well, actually, I'm just reading one of her books as we speak. Why? And they said, well, we want to bring her out to Christchurch to do an event. And we had this strong feeling that you have to meet her. And I just got this surge of energy that went through my body. So, long and short of it, I cancelled my sessions for a week and I went down to Christchurch. And we met. And it was just, you know, when you meet someone and there's that instant recognition, that sense of, oh yeah, I know you, I know your soul. And so to begin with, we just hung out with my friends who were hosting her. And I even cooked her dinner, which very much impressed her.
What did you cook?
Oh, I cooked her spanakopita, spinach pie and salad or something like that, you see. So, yeah, so it was quite nice because she knew me as Blair before she knew me as the channel. And then over that week, just hanging out, and then at some point, I introduced her to Tabaash, and he gave her some really relevant information. And anyway, afterwards, you know, she says, "Oh, you're the real deal," you know. So it was just from that time on.
Well, even that's a big deal because I know she was quite a, you know, she didn't suffer fools easily, I've been told.
Oh, totally.
And
absolutely.
she was quite skeptical when it came to frauds. In fact, Julia told me a story about years ago, she went to get her palms read, and she would very easily be able to tell who was fake and who was not. And actually, she had that ability, I don't know if you know this, to read palms. And she actually flipped the roles, and she gave the reading and blew this woman away with her ability to. A lot of people don't realize that she was incredibly intuitive. She had her own gifts, but she didn't necessarily like to allow that to get in the way because from a research point of view, she wanted to be uninvolved in the process to get the information.
I think with someone like Dolores, you know, she obviously had an enormous amount of qualities, and you put it all together, that's what made Dolores Cannon. And she didn't necessarily practice all those abilities, but she found the thread of consciousness that she excelled in. But I think she excelled because of all the other parts together. It's like components, really. And I loved the naturalness of her. I loved her mind, you know, a highly intelligent woman, and you know, could easily converse on a very high level. And she could be very sharp. You know, if she didn't agree with someone, you know, or something, she would say something, but it was just like you felt you were cut. She never did that to me. But you know, we became really good friends. I hosted her in Wellington because I ran these big meditation teaching evenings in Wellington for every month for about 12 years, basically. And Tabaash would do a teaching first, and then he would take the audience through a big guided meditation using music. Interesting about the music, because Tabaash never likes New Age music or tinkle music. But he would direct me around town to try to find stimulating, powerful music that he would use in his meditation. And I remember once I was walking, and this is in the day of CDs, walking by a CD shop in Tabaash, and my head says, oh, I want you to go into that store, there's a CD I want you to get. So off I went. He told me the name of it. So I went to the counter, mentioned it, and the guy looked up on computer, and he goes, no, I don't have that, I don't know what you're talking about. So I said, look, I have it on really good authority that it is in here. Well, I'll have another look, I'll just check out the back. And he found it. And he goes, I have no idea where that came from. Anyway, so Tabaash used this piece of music, and it was quite extraordinary. It was Gothic Gregorian chant with a rock beat. And it was so powerful. People were having the most extraordinary experiences. So we're talking about 200 people in the theater. Anyway, I went back to the store a couple of days later, and then this guy comes up to me, oh, this is all your fault. I said, what? And he goes, the whole country. You know, it's like they've ordered this CD.
Wow.
And anyway, I got a really good discount after that, every time I went to buy music. So, so Dolores came to one of my meetings, and of course, you know, people knew about her well and her books, etc. And so she was on stage, and Tabaash and her together on stage, talking. And then I was a key speaker at several of her transformation conferences that were run in the US. And then Dolores and I and her daughter Julia, we went on tour. So we did Mount Shasta, we did Ojai, we went to Dallas, you know, we went to so many different states and did the most extraordinary meetings and just had fun. Julie was doing the driving in the Dolores mobile, as I called it. And it was a great experience, actually. And I think when you're touring like that with somebody, you're just being yourselves. And I was going through some pictures the other day, because someone said to me, oh, you must love touring and stuff. And of course, sometimes you're just basically doing your event, getting up at 2 in.the morning to get a flight and be somewhere else, etc., etc. So there's this photo that Julia took of Dolores and I, and we're in an airport, and Dolores is sitting there, and I'm here. And we had got up at 2 in.the morning to drive to LAX, even though LAX was only like 2 hours away, but the traffic, you know, because we were flying up north. So I'm sort of sitting there with my feet up on my carry-on. I'm like this, and Dolores is leading like like this, and I've just got the joys of traveling, the joys of touring. So.
Well, and I know, you know, she really did take, in my perception anyway, is she really took you under her personal wing. She was very nurturing towards you because she really believed in what you're about, your energy. And I said this yesterday, you know, I really feel like you are a very similar energy than her. Mm-hmm. Do you think you've shared past lives with her, or there's more
absolutely.
of a connection?
Yeah. I mean, one thing I've noticed with anyone that I come in contact with, even yourself, you know, you get to a certain point where, you know, this is your work, this is your vocation. So you become this magnet for the individuals. So it's like we're all lifelines pulling into a certain experience or a time in our history or whatever the case is. And yeah, like I said, when I first met Dolores, it's like, well, yeah, I know you, you know, and so you recognize the energy of people's souls, and you understand the collaboration that's actually happening. Mm. And then obviously, you know, with Dolores' passing, that physical connection is gone, but I do feel her around a lot, and she has often let me know she's around. And the way she does it is, I've got this photograph on my phone of her, and I remember one time I was just somewhere sitting quietly, and I had my phone off, so it was actually turned off. And then suddenly my phone flashed on. You say, no, what's that? And I turned it up, and there was this picture of Dolores. It's like she was going, how are you doing? And that often happens, you know.
Have you sensed her over the weekend, for example?
Yeah, totally,
here?
absolutely.
Because this is the first big event you've
well,
done.
You know, there's no way she's going to miss out. You know,
any sense, any messages you're getting from her, inspiration?
Oh, no, she's Dolores was always about, I mean, just the feeling I'm getting as you're talking, is get on with the work. It's really important. You know, just do it. You know, and she was very much like that in in her own work, and when she understood something was important, don't shilly-shally around and ask too many questions. You got a job to do, get on with it, which is what she was doing.
Well, the way I see it as well is you really embody the extension of her work. And I've articulated this to yourself and to other people. I felt that she came to lay a foundation, and like a building, the foundation takes a lot of time. You don't see a lot of movement on the surface, but then eventually once that is laid, the structure comes along and is built. I feel in many ways, you and I, other people in this field, are really that structure being built.
Well, if you look at any light workers, there's always those who've established a particular energy for that time in their history, and then others will take up the vibration of that and then just carry on with that, and then just keep on building. No doubt there'll be others who build from who we are, and it's just a consistent. Well, it's the component thing. It's bringing together all these different factions of energy. We all have a role to play at a certain time. And as Tabaash would say, well, right at the moment we're just all God's doing it this way. In the future, other souls will be God's doing it that way, so to speak. You see, so it's all relevant to the way we're all evolving, mind, body, and spirit. So at a certain time in history, there were the Dolores Cannons, and then in other times in history there'll be other souls, etc. Basically. So, but I always look at it like we're all from source, just doing our service and doing our job, and just do it in the way that we do as individuals.
Yeah. Well, it's been quite a journey that you've been on, and I know you have been doing this work. Is it 35, 36 years?
Yeah, getting into 36 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people would say, wow, that's, are you tired? Are you energized enough to keep going? But I'm sure that when you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, you don't get tired. You don't get tired of doing something. There's an energy there, isn't it?
I think when you have a vocation for something, you have a natural energy that's available to you all the time. And obviously, in the work I do, I'm being directed and guided by Source. And I understand that there are certain things, mind, body, and spirit, I have to do just to ensure that I keep focused and healthy, etc. And don't get me wrong, I'm not living some huge strict regime or anything like that. And I love eating nice food and nice wine, and hang out with my mates, and go to clubs and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I'm highly respectful of my service to Source, but also highly respectful of who I am, mind, body, and spirit. So I'll make sure I look after myself, mind, body, and spirit, so I can do what I do, because this is my life.
A lot of people, particularly, and I see it quite prevalently in the spiritual community, become quite dogmatic around not eating certain foods or not drinking alcohol because they feel it has an effect on one's vibration. I think about it, veganism is a big thing now, and a lot of people feel like it's cruel and it's unspiritual. How would you speak to those people that perhaps polarized towards a very dogmatic way of
well, I think it's the way you approach anything. Everything's a vibration, but you put a story onto that situation, and therefore, if you believe that that's bad for you, well, then it'll be bad for you. And I always remember reading, I think it was one of the Peaceful Warrior books by Dan Millman, and when Dan Millman was going for a big jog up a hill with Socrates, and Socrates, beat him and came down, and Dan Millman came puffing away back, and here's Socrates standing at the bottom of the hill smoking a cigarette. And Dan Millman looked at him and he said, "What are you doing?" He said, "You've been teaching me all this healthy living and healthy thinking and healthy feeling, and here you are taking a cigarette." And Socrates just took a puff and blew it out into the air and looked at Dan and said, "Well, yeah," he says, "but you see, I've got higher vibrational frequencies, so I can, counteract any effects the cigarette's going to have on me."
Yeah.
So in other words, your attitude towards anything.
Well, I've heard similar things with yogis in India, and some of the most enlightened, so to speak, have been seen sitting there smoking a cigarette on the street.
I think human nature has this propensity to, we need a particular set of rules that we have to abide by that is going to purify ourselves. And it tends to be all about denial in some way or another, mind, body, spirit. Okay, you have certain disciplines, and I think it's also an individual experience. So, I mean, I know psychics and mediums and things like that who, smoke and drink and all that sort of stuff, and it doesn't seem to be affecting, who they are.
Or their work.
And okay, it might be affecting their physical health at some point, but I think it's about anything in life, whether it's food or who you're with or whatever, it's your story. So you have to decide, well, what's your story going to be around that situation? So if you feel that you just want to go and have a Mac attack, and if you sit there going like, oh, this is really bad for me, I shouldn't be having this, but you eat it anyway. Or as you go, oh, I feel like a Mac attack, I'm going to go and have that, really enjoy that, and that'll do me for a while, so to speak. That's a better attitude towards it, you see.
Well, certainly in my life, I've learned that balance is so important.
Yes, of course it is.
The moment I think we get too far in one direction or another is when things tend to go wrong. Or we burn out, or we find that we go too extreme. There's a lot of that in society, particularly in the spiritual community, and we spoke about it earlier. I've seen it over the last couple of years when it's come to conspiracy, and particularly what we've gone through over the last couple of years within this community, that has become more prevalent, where it does take people down a dark road. What would you say?
Well, I think that's human nature, and so when you're really living your life from your higher nature, or as Tabaash calls it, your God nature, then you just get on and do what you do. And of course, if you have people who are into conspiracy theories and all that, they're still very involved in the emotions of fear, worries, anxiety, whatever. And so rather than go to their souls and just get on with it, instead they have to, wear their emotions around them all the time. Then this is where they get into, the doubts and the fears and the conspiracies and what's wrong and who's been doing what to whom and all that sort of stuff, basically, as opposed to, hey, hang on a minute, I'm God in my body. Let's live a good life. Let's not, get involved in this type of thing. But that's just where those people are at.
And it's giving your power away to a certain extent, because you're seeing someone outside of your own experience as being more powerful than you, having more ability to make changes in your life than you do. It's one form of giving your power away, isn't it?
When you said that, it made me think of perhaps someone like myself and other people who are speaking these stories and these truths. It's almost like we're a catalyst for growth for people, and they may not want to see that. So rather than look at that and go, oh, hang on a minute, that's interesting. I may not believe it, but let's think about it. Some people are going to go, oh, that's a whole lot of shit, basically. So they'll create a story around it, or make up something, or try to discredit it in some particular way, basically. But it invariably comes down to the way you respond to something will always tell you about yourself. And so, and I'm very conscious of that at myself as well, when I learn how to follow my responses around quite a lot. And of course, the more you stay aligned, mind, body, spirit, then of course you tend to attract towards you anything that is harmonious and productive. But, if you waver, then straight away, and I'll give you a good example of this. So I was visiting someone. I was actually my late wife in the care home when she was in there. And I was with a mate of mine, and we were meeting up at my place to go out afterwards. And he was in his car, so I said, well, I'll meet you at my place. And it was rush hour traffic. It was going to take ages to get back. So I sat in the car park and I thought, I said, I'm going to go into the New Earth energy. I'm going to create the reality that there's no traffic. So I sat in the car park, and so I pulled out. And sure enough, it was like driving on a Sunday at 2 in the morning or something. There's hardly anyone around. And so I'm sort of driving away, and I thought, no traffic, no traffic. And then the moment I wavered, it was really weird, because suddenly traffic appeared. Just like this, just, where did that come from? So once I kept my focus, I got home in 2 minutes. There was no traffic at all. Anyway, I got home, and my mate rings me up, and he goes, where are you? I said, well, I'm at home. And he said, well, you were in front of me, and then you seemed to disappear. And I said, oh, well, da-da-da-da-da-da. And he got caught in traffic. It took him another 20 minutes. And I just thought, that can be so indicative of anything. When you have a certain focus and you have a belief in how to harness energy, and you can create these realities. And I've done this quite a few times. A really weird thing that happened to me. I was driving up to Auckland from Wellington, which is a 8-hour drive. And I like driving at night, so I left about 3 in the morning. So I was going through this area called the Desert Road, which is full of volcanoes and stuff like that. And I was chanting, and I was just doing the I am God stuff, etc., you see. Anyway, I stopped off in Taupo, had breakfast, I went to the gym before I went to my folks' place. Got to my parents' place. My dad was just coming out to get the paper, and he looked at me and he goes, what are you doing here? I said, what do you mean? He goes, it's only 7 a.m. And I'm sort of like, don't be ridiculous, it should be at least 11 or something like that. And so I looked at my watch, and sure enough, it was only 7 a.m. So I thought, I wonder what happened here. So I went into my room, and I asked Spirit. And they said, well, when you're doing the chant, you just basically moved away from time. And so you just literally positioned yourself on a whole different time zone.
Well, even time is a construct of the human mind.
Of course,
it's an agreement that we've come upon. At a bigger perspective, it doesn't actually exist, does it?
Yes. Well,
so I suppose once you have expanded your consciousness so much, you're not bound to the laws of
Well, you just get
time
involved
and
in life, in just moments as such, you see. And so, and of course, because everything's energy, vibration. So obviously whatever I was doing and whatever my frequency is, I allowed myself to align to a particular formula that just made that happen, you see. But I must admit, I did think, I hope I didn't leave my luggage in the middle of the desert road somewhere. So, but it's as things progress more and more over these years, I really realize how much everything is vibration and energy. And that you can really manipulate it and organize it. And it is through, the way you think. But before you think, it's your relationship with yourself.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because, as you know, one of the most famous quotes that Dolores Cannon is known to have said is that everything is energy, and that we're here to learn how to manipulate that.
Correct.
We are master manifestors. When you hear the words, we're here to manipulate energy, how would you articulate one does that? Because I get asked that question all the time. How do I manipulate energy?
Well, I'm just watching you as you speak. I mean, your physical body is energy. Your hand gestures are energy. So you're manipulating your energy. You're manipulating this particular field. And so as we become more multidimensional, then, we realize that it's no different. So if you understand how powerful you are, and of course, people hear the word manipulation, they automatically put a negative connotation.
Well, they think of the negative context, right? And so
you're organizing frequency, you're organizing energy.
So organizing or directing, I think the dictionary definition is to mold or to shape something in a particular way, or to go in a particular direction. Obviously more of a positive context of the same word.
I mean, we do that all the time, through writing things, planning our days. There's a consistent manipulation of energy, through the way we think, the way we feel, the way we act, everything. I don't think it's any more remarkable to do that on a metaphysical level, to realize just that we're just harnessing frequency and energy, and learning how to direct the vibration. I mean, just if you look at the lights, that are beaming on us at the moment, that's just an organization of frequency, of energy, manifested in this particular form. And it I mean, Spirit always says, it's simple, it's easy. You know, it's one of the analogies I give for channeling is, I always say, imagine it's a bit like when you're watching TV and you're on a particular station and you're watching that program. But that doesn't mean all the other stations don't exist. They're actually happening simultaneously. So you just need to shift the station and suddenly you're on a different program.
It's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And it's easy for us to understand in that form because we can relate to that.
But you don't have to be a channel. I mean, that's how we are as people. You know, we're just always tapping into different stations or different frequencies of ourselves.
It makes me think of, you know, in more modern terms of reels and TikToks and everything, and people flicking from one reel or one TikTok or another. It's the same thing. We give something attention, we don't like it, we flick to the next thing. It's almost become compulsive for people to do that, like they used to do with flicking a channel.
I think human beings, you know, we tend to think if it's tangible, then it's real. If we can see it, it's real. If we can touch it, it's real. But then you get into the, you know, metaphysic aspect of it, and you get into the feeling aspect of it, where it's different, and everyone feels on all levels, then that tends to freak people out because it's like, well, hang on a minute, I feel something, but I can't see it.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know?
it makes me think of love. Love we cannot
emotions,
see, but we can see love expressing itself in so many different ways through human nature, through the way we interact with each other, through the way we care for the planet. Even though we can't tangibly see it, we can see evidence of it playing out in experience.
Of course it is, And, you know, we got this power within us to interact with everything. And therefore, you know, obviously, most humans would interact simply with their minds and their bodies. And then suddenly we're at a point in history where we're consciously interacting with our soul or spirit. And that's changing the dynamics of how we experience life. Because we've actually, for want of a better phrase, we brought another dimension into our lives. And in doing so, it has opened up more of life in every way possible. And okay, in some cases, people, oh yeah, I get that. And they get enhanced. And for some people, they freak out about it. And then some people go, oh, that's a bunch of whatever, and just don't want to know. So they stay locked into their human perspective. And again, nothing wrong with that. But I mean, you know, thinking of our conversation earlier, here we are at a time in history where, you know, people are turning those soul lights on and realizing, oh, there's so much more to who I am. Therefore, I've got so much more access to much more life and more power and therefore more success and so on and so forth. And that's why I think it's, when you can harness that, you do see the benefits of it physiologically, mentally, emotionally. And I mean, I've seen it in the way I've run my life, with my friends who are open to this and the way they've run their lives. But I also see it with people I know who don't. And you know, they keep tripping up and all that sort of stuff. And of course, I'm always their go-to mate. Oh, you know, what's happening in my life? That sort of stuff. And you know, you can lay out the practicalities of things to people, but everyone has to get there in their own way. And that's why there's no such thing as timing in regards to all this sort of stuff. You know, and you know, when I think about so many people who focus on hopping from channel to medium to psychic to seminar to whatever, and they believe that is self-development by going to all these things. And while they're there, they're getting really caught up into the collective energy of it, the sharing of it, and it feels powerful and supportive, et cetera, et cetera. But then they go home on their own, and they don't have that support energy anymore. So I better sign up for the next course. You know, so the whole idea is that if you're going to get involved in anything like that, well, how can I use this in my life? Well, I went to the Tabaash seminar, I went to the Dolores seminar, I went to the Cryon seminar. Oh, how can I use this in my life? And that's the whole idea.
Well, that's why I asked that question, you know, how to manipulate energy. Because, for example, that one phrase has been shared millions of times on social media in different forms. People love it. It resonates with people. But the number one question I get asked over and over again is, that's great, I love it, but how do I do it? And that's exactly what you're talking about, is because we get all of this information, it almost becomes intellectual knowledge, but then unless we're applying it to our lives, it's just going to be information coming in and going out.
Well, it's just a daily journey, really. You know, as Tabaash says, every day you wake up, you have a chance of life again. And every day of your life you decide, okay, today what shall I think? Today what shall I feel? Today how shall I do the driving? So it's that awareness. So it's not some big magic formula that, you know, you have to practice in some, you know, heavy content as such. It's just more of a matter of, well, you know, just pay attention to your day and your thoughts and your feelings. You know, be conscious of what you're doing. I mean, one of the things that Spirit taught me right at the very beginning when I first started channeling, and when I asked, I said, well, how can I make this a way of living? And they said, add the idea of God to whatever you do before you do it. And so I thought, okay, well, that makes sense. So like when I go to the gym, before I train, I'll always go, I'm God as a superhuman athlete. You know, I find myself walking downtown, I'm God walking downtown, I'm God at the supermarket. You know, and then little by little you find that you're training your system up to just being aligned to that power. And, you know, people don't have to use the God word. You could use consciousness or light or whatever, but it's just focus, pay attention, harness the energy. And you know, I've had extraordinary experiences with doing that. You know, you just feel this power coming through your physical body. At the gym once, I was training with a trainer, we were doing leg press. And he packed up 320 kgs on the leg press, you see. I sort of looked at it and thought, oh, I'm just going to have to call on part of me that knows how to do this. So I closed my eyes. And I could feel the energy just coming into my system. And I pressed that weight 30 reps and like really deep. And I didn't even break a sweat and didn't go red or anything. And I just clicked in and then stood up and had some water. And these big giant guys who were standing around me going like, how did you do that? You know, like that. And my trainer, he just said, I don't understand that. I said, well, I just tapped into source. You know, this is what, you know, what we do. And I think we do that in every respect possible.
Yeah, absolutely. What does God mean to you, the word God?
Yep.
How do you define
I see it as
God?
The highest state of consciousness. You know, okay, it's a being of energy, you know. I don't see it as a human form.
It doesn't have genitalia. Let's
exactly.
just put that out there because it's so interesting, isn't it? When people talk about God, they describe it as a male.
Yep.
Of course it's going to be a male, right? We live in this society.
Well, I mean, if you think about when those sorts of stories about God were first created, you know, think about it was a very male-orientated way of living in history. And therefore, you know, it was like the man was the most powerful energy, and, you know, the role of women was totally subjugated. You know, if you look at it through religions and teachings, etc., still is in some cases. And so they personified God in human terms. And of course, I think that's a mistake that humans make too, is that they try to humanize God, and you can't humanize something that's just consciousness.
So we really created God in our image, not the other way around.
Yeah, totally, yeah. So I look at God as the highest consciousness that is living, that is available to us. And therefore, when we align to our God nature, we're just going to the part of us that knows everything. But again, it's just a word. But you know, when humans hear the word God, they automatically, you know, assume, you know, dogma and religions and rules and systems and all that sort of stuff. Whereas I look at it like as a formula, like G plus O plus D equals life. You know, so when you're aligned to that higher consciousness, then you're aligned to life, and then it's all available to you, and then you just pull it through you, basically, see. But it's a living consciousness. Yeah.
Was that Dolores' understanding of God from what you know? Did you have chats about these
No, I don't
sort
think
of
we ever
things
had that sort of conversation. But she understood it as a consciousness, yes.
Yeah. And I you know this about me, but I was brought up in the church. And, you know, my whole understanding of God really did evolve, because it began at one time of believing God was a masculine energy, or a father, as the Bible articulates it. But then that encompasses all gender, all things. It's beyond form. It's the creative force.
I'm laughing because I'm just getting a picture of sort of God as a woman with a Farrah Fawcett hairstyle and that type of thing, basically.
Well, Dolores always said that if God was going to have a gender, he would be more like a woman anyway. Which always makes everyone laugh when they hear it. But well, it would be that way, wouldn't it? Because women are probably embody more, certainly in the physical, as the creative force.
Yep.
They give birth,
Yep.
they create.
Well, I think our souls are androgynous. So God's just an androgynous being made up of positive, negative frequencies and male, female energies as such. You know, we all have that. You know, we all have the male aspect, the female aspect of ourselves. And I think, you know, through history, obviously, there's been too much focus on just the male energy. You know, and I think that has brought a lot of imbalance. And of course, over the decades, you know, there's been a lot more balance that people have embraced, you know, the feminine power. And of course, the feminine power is just that frequency. It's just that vibration. So it's like when you take the atom, it's made up of opposing ions, the positive, negative. So we're no different. And so as a state of consciousness, as a soul, you know, we need to utilize the male part of us or the female part of us. I mean, I even at times, you know, if I'm in a situation where I'm a bit unsure, I'll just literally say, oh, you know, what would the guy in me do? What would the girl in me do? You know, and I will get answers, basically. Or should I approach this from the man part of me or the girl part of me? You know, or the God part of me, you know?
Well, and a lot of men would find it difficult to admit that they had a female side.
Yep.
Particularly people that have a strong egoic mindset, very masculine in energy. But we're coming into a time, I think it's really important that we do learn to balance these energies, if you like, within ourselves. Because we all have all of the energies, don't we? Masculine, feminine.
Well, again, you know, humans generalize and they think about male, female, they automatically go to the physical. You know, whereas we're talking about vibration here, frequency here. So when you utilize your femininity, you know, you're utilizing your creative side, you're using your spiritual side, you're using your nurturing side, etc. I mean, everyone has everything, obviously. But I think also, too, you know, the collective consciousness of humanity has obviously needed to experience all vibrations and all energies. And now we're at a point where everything is really coming together. You know, so, you know, as Tabaash often says, you know, some people you just, like he calls me, oh, Blair's a man, woman. You know, and he knows some clients and, you know, oh, you're a woman, man. You know, and then some couples, he says, it's like, well, you're both men, women, so it makes you like having 4 people in the relationship, basically. You wake up in the morning, are you the girl today or the boy? You know, so to speak.
Well, that's all. I think 3 in a relationship's a throuple. I don't know what 4 is.
So, but yet I can see that in people I know, and in observation, not just in, you know, heterosexual couples, but in same-sex couples as well. You know, you just see, you know, who's the girl, who's the boy. You know, but it's that vibrational thing, basically.
Well, it makes me think of the conversation we had the other day, just about monogamy.
Yes.
And and I think this has come from centuries of particularly wanting to control the human species. It came through our mainstream religions, this idea of monogamy. I think if we're really honest as a species, a lot of us will realize that concept itself is something that's not kind of natural, and in the animal kingdom, they don't conform to these rules and regulations. What do you think, how do you think we navigate some of these ideas as we move into these newer energies about the way we see things like monogamy?
I don't want to walk on hot coals here.
An divisive question, I'm sure.
So I'm just thinking about the way to put it. I think that as we're evolving as a species and as souls, then we're changing the dynamics of what relationships are to us. And I don't think monogamy is natural to human nature, but I think for humans to be able to move forward from that, one has to have a huge amount of respect for oneself. So, you know, not being monogamous doesn't mean you just go out there and shag anyone you want. You know, it's literally about, first and foremost, your respect for who you are, mind, body, and spirit. And therefore, you know, you turn it into something wonderful.
Well, it's a state of consciousness, isn't it?
Yes.
Because I think if you're coming from a lower vibrational place, you want to, get really carnal and shag, basically, so to speak. But if you're respective of your own body, your own self, the other, then you're just coming from a different place of sharing and expressing.
You know, as we're talking, I'm thinking, for most people, you know, they'd hear this and they automatically would just assume about, you know, having sex with people. But I mean, monogamy isn't just in the sexual sense. I think it's about everything. You know, so I think we're learning how to understand intimacy from a whole different perspective, because intimacy isn't just sex. You know, intimacy is how do we get close to life? How do we get close to each other, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually? And so there are lots of ways of, you know, being intimate with life, you know, without always just seeing it as sex. And I think that's what human nature is actually learning to do. They're learning about intimacy and just the gentleness of that vibration and energy. And I think human nature has to expand on it just from a sexual perspective and realize, hang on a minute, it's everything. It's a state of consciousness. Which states of intimate consciousness do we want to involve with ourselves with?
Yeah. Well, it's certainly an interesting time that we're all going through, I think, personally, collectively. There's been many surprises along the way. I don't think anyone predicted the last couple of years would actually manifest in the way that it has. Do you think we are now in a really positive territory as humanity? Do you think the worst of it is behind us? Are we ready now to go into a much more positive light, or do we still have to go through more lessons before we get it?
I don't look at it like we've been through the worst. You know, I look at it like we're just living life and we're just going through life. Obviously, humanity collectively has had to live through whatever we've had to live through. And we've lived through that because that's what we've created, individually, collectively. And through that process, we've had to know ourselves, but also know each other through that process. I think where we're heading now is there's a more conscious collective energy. We're all on each other's side more than ever before. So that degree of separation that's been so prevalent through history seems to be dissipating. And I think human nature is just sick of conflict and sick of the fear and everything that's attached with the systems and how things are being run. And so people are finding their voices. And so collectively, we've evolved to the point where, you know, what's that concept? Of full disclosure. Everything's just being disclosed. This is who we are. This is what we're all about. This is what we think. This is what we feel. And I think the time of the old draconian methodologies and way of social energy and politics and all that sort of stuff, that's had its day. But you can't just throw that away and then just stand with nothing. You know, you have to go through a process, which is what we're doing. So we've turned a corner, for sure. And whether we keep suffering, well, that's entirely up to us as individuals. So, but I think we're more conscious of how we're writing the story. And there's so much more information available, and people have such greater awareness, you know, within themselves, and realizing, you know, the concept of creating the reality and what that means, not just to their own lives, but, you know, to what they're adding to the world and how that's going to be. So, yeah, it's like a big blank space every day at the moment. And human beings just don't want to put up with stuff anymore. And if something occurs, and I can see people realize, oh yeah, no, I don't do that anymore. I do it differently now. And I think the more we focus on that, then we're creating a greater state of consciousness where we're pulling together whether we know it or not. And therefore that creates, you know, a greater vibration and energy. That's got to be enlightenment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, as you're saying that, you know, that we write our own story,
Yes. Yep.
It reminds me of one of Dolores Cannon's most famous quotes, is that we are the director of our own life.
Correct.
We are the script writer.
Yep.
We're the main actor in our own play.
Totally. Yeah.
And if we don't like the script, we don't like the way it's playing out, we can change it anytime we want.
Make sure you're on the right script. You know, sometimes people, you know, I used an analogy once where it's like you had a lead part in Thunderdome, but you've got the script for The Sound of Music, you know, and it's literally about, oh, hang on a minute, you know, is this the story that I really want? Is this a part I really want to play?
Is this and this concept isn't new with Dolores. I mean,
Yep.
Shakespeare, I'm sure you're familiar with it, had a very similar way
Yes.
of describing life, is
Yep.
that life was like a great stage,
Yes.
and actors come on,
Yep.
they make their entrances and exits at certain
Yes.
times, they
Yep.
play out their parts,
Yes. Yep.
and then they leave.
Yes.
And it's almost like a costume, or the word human is the word, I think
Yes.
the Greek word persona,
Yep. Yep.
to
Yep.
personify something.
I like what Tabaash has said. He says, it's the way you wear yourself.
Yeah, great.
And so if you're wearing yourself in the highest way, then you just walk outside your front door and you start creating good things. And obviously, if you don't wear yourself in the highest way, well, then you'll get that. You know, so it's rather like going to the wardrobe of life each day. You know, how shall I wear myself today?
So what would you say to a person that maybe has created a life that they're, you know, very displeased with? They've had so much lack in their life,
Yes.
or they haven't got the right relationship, or
Yep,
they
yep.
tend to repeat the same patterns of their life. Where does someone like that start? I mean, if someone's coming across this information
yeah.
for the first time, and they're not embodying any of this stuff.
Well, I always would say that everybody has lots of futures. So we don't just travel one road. If you investigate your possible futures from your mind, from your body, from your spirit, then, you know, it gets back to what I said before, the way you wear yourself, because, you know, the way you do that, then that will determine the way you think, the way you feel, the way you participate in life. And of course, that's going to create a vibration, and that vibration will determine which of those futures, you know, you feel drawn to. And I think humanity, again, well, this is a road, I don't have choice. So with people who are, you know, wanting to change, I would say stand still. And who am I? What am I doing? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? Does that serve me? And if it doesn't, well then, let's just stand still for a moment and just have a conversation with myself and say to myself, oh, I choose to be at peace with this. I want to change this. And then take whatever steps feel natural to you. You don't just go diving into the ocean in the hope that you'll learn to swim along the road. You know, and I also think that, you know, when people say, you know, I'm ready for change, the moment you take a step, you're never alone. There's always going to be resources available to you, supports available to you, that are there to guide you, direct you. And I'm not just talking, you know, spiritually, but even in human terms. You know, this is something always there. Life will speak to us all of the time, basically. And I think, you know, just live life, chill. You know, don't make it a big deal. You know, but of course, people start unwinding themselves, and they start often looking at, oh God, I've really ruined my life, and da 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 da. You know, whereas Tabaash would say, no, you were just God doing it that way. Now you're God doing it this way. So,
And that could be through addiction, it could be whatever. I mean, because everything is
totally. Yep.
I loved what he said yesterday, and I know you don't always recall all the information that comes through, if you do recall anything. But one of the things he said is that we, you know, it was talking about multiple lives, and we obviously have many incarnations. But he said that we really only ever have the one life, but we have it in many different bodies.
Don't you just love that?
I love that.
Yeah,
I don't know if he said that before.
Well, it's just the ongoingness of life.
Yeah,
You know?
it's a great way to look at it. And
Yep.
then it goes with the costume analogy,
Yes.
which Dolores spoke about, is that you're just putting on a different costume
Yes, yep.
for that particular
So
life.
you wear yourself,
This
yeah.
time I'm going to be the wife, and that other soul's going to be
yep,
the husband. And then
completely,
the next
yep.
time, will you be the husband, I be the wife. That's why when you look at things like racism and all the other isms that are out there, and all none of that stuff makes any sense when you understand this
Yep.
from a higher perspective, because we have been everything,
Yep.
in many different forms, in this dimension, other dimensions, other realities. Where do you think all of that hate has come from over the centuries? Because
Oh,
there's
gosh,
been one big drama that's played out.
I think it's an educated thing. You know, you learn to fear, you learn to hate. You know, I don't think anyone is born, you know, with that at all. You know, and then this is where I suppose you have to bring in other lives that you've led, and so, you know, sometimes people can be born with a high level of defensiveness or sensitivity or bigotry or whatever, you know, and they're obviously working something through that vibration and energy, as much as anyone who's on the receiving end of it is working something through by being on the receiving end of it. And so, but I think it's learned behavior, you know, through history. And yet here we are learning a new behavior. And as people become more aware of moving away from that. But, you know, a lot of that also stems from rules and systems and rituals that are being created and you know, certain people and energies segregating themselves and creating problems for themselves because of that, basically. And therefore creating a lot of issues simply because of that. But again, you know, what I said before about, you know, there are no degrees of separation. You know, when you realize that everything is everything and everyone is everyone, you know, then that's when you realize, well, you can't really make any judgment on that. But, you know, human nature is used to hating each other or fighting each other or being in conflict with each other.
Even themselves, hating themselves. How many people are berating or beating themselves up or putting themselves down? I mean,
or not being themselves because of rules and systems that are put on, you know, who they are as individuals or their sexuality or being a woman or being a man or being disabled or whatever. And so I think it's the rules. It's the rules that humanity has created to control other humans.
That's really the crux of it, isn't it? Because it's always been about controlling, and we, you know, we see this with narcissistic relationships. You know, currently, and I see it hugely in the communities that we find ourselves in. People needing to create that for themselves because maybe that's where they're at. And maybe at the moment I'm seeing a lot of people coming out of that and realizing that is for what it is and that they no longer want that in their life.
You just triggered something in my thoughts, which was we're at a point where we're changing the rules. And I think a lot of people, they don't know what the rules are at the moment. And because they've been so used to thinking in certain ways and living in a certain way or being told to live in a certain way, etc. And now here we are at this time in history where it's rather like the old rule book has been thrown out the window.
We're writing new ones.
Yeah, it's like, well, what do we do now? You know?
Well, it's like writing the script for our life.
Yeah, totally. And that's exciting. So as individuals, but also as a collective. You know, it's like, you know, like Tabaash said yesterday, someone talked to me afterwards, they liked the analogy he gave about humanity's writing a book and you're all a word. You know, and so everybody on this planet is one word, but in that one word there's a lot to say, and therefore we're all adding to that book, to that energy. That's exciting.
So Tabaash is coming back to Australia on the 16th of February. In Sydney, Australia. At a great venue on the harbour there in Vaucluse. Are you excited about the event?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I know you never know what
I have no idea what he's going to talk about.
There are those that are watching this that came to the Melbourne event and those that have been familiar with this work. It's never the same. It's never the same information. That's what makes it so exciting and dynamic.
But it's never the same vibration. You know, even if you got, say, exactly the same people who came to the Melbourne event and transported them to Sydney, it would still be a different vibration because everything's just evolving all of the time.
Well, we're co-creating anything together. And even as we're doing this interview now, we're co-creating a dialogue that has a certain vibration to it. And that's the way it kind of is. You know, you can do different interviews with different people. It's all going to be so different, even if the content is similar.
I mean, I've done a lot of interviews over the years and, you know, similar questions are asked, but, you know, just listening to myself answering them, it's like, oh yeah, you're quite clever there. Oh yeah, you know,
it just comes out in a different way. Well, that's a perfect analogy of channeling, isn't it? Because it's almost like the information comes through us. It's an expression of consciousness, and it always comes out differently. In different circumstances.
Definitely.
And that's why I'm so excited about the Sydney event. I'm going to give people the details. Thanks for sitting down with us today.
It's been awesome. Thank you.
And we've had a great weekend. As you said, a lot of it's been about the energy.
Correct.
And it's been very tangible, and that's why I want as many people to come to this Sydney event in Australia that can be there, because there's something very tangible. I like to think these things are caught rather than taught or spoken. It's energy. Everything's energy.
Well, thank you, Paul. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.